Jeff, start us off here. Who is your biggest sleeper at the wide receiver position?
Just like last week when I talked about Travion Williams on that episode, I'm going to dig deep again, and I'm going to go with KJ Osborne. KJ Osborne is going off the board as wide receiver 68, all the way down there. And so last year he came in, he was wide receiver 45 last year. And I know that everybody is worried about the addition of TJ Hawkinson for a full season and the addition of Jordan Addison in the NFL draft. But of course, he played last year with Adam Thielen for the whole year. And during the second half of the season, TJ Hawkinson was there on that team. Now, over the last 5 weeks of the season, KJ Osborne was wide receiver 7 overall in PPR scoring. And so you look at a total last year, so this is an ADP of wide receiver 68 right now, way down the board. And last year he finished as wide receiver 45. No big winner, but at the same time, in underdog scoring, especially when you're playing in a best ball format, you can get startable weeks. And Osborne has shown that over stretches of his 2-year career that he will go off on certain weeks. Now, we saw today the news that Dalvin Cook was no longer a member of the Minnesota Vikings offense. And so my expectation would be less passing game work overall for the running backs, because you take Dalvin Cook out of that offense, you hammer the ball with Alexander Mattison, you play a lot of 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets, because that's what Kevin O'Connell, that's what that branch of the Sean McVay offense has liked to do, play those 3 wide receiver sets. KJ Osborne is locked in as the slot wide receiver for this Vikings team, and he has the ability to play outside as Jordan Addison gets up to speed. He's viewed as an afterthought, but he has that ability. I think the Vikings will be passing quite a bit. That offense is going to struggle, or the defense is going to struggle, but that offense is going to be solid and in shootouts. And so it's just giving you these opportunities that he can go off on any given week, especially in best ball formats, deliver on that ADP where he is getting drafted around players. Let's real quick. Who is he going around? He's going around like Van Jefferson or Marvin Mims, or these rookies that are kind of questionable on if they are going to have a role on the offense, or even Adam Thielen, who's questionable what his role is going to be in Carolina. You get a high volume target on a good passing offense that can deliver, and God forbid Justin Jefferson's not in the lineup, that's going to spike that value. That ability is there. Not that I believe overall in handcuff wide receivers, but he does have that ability, and he would be the most established receiver in the room if Justin Jefferson was out of the lineup.
Yeah, and I think people have just immediately crowned Jordan Addison as the de facto wide receiver 2. He is going to see the 600 whatever routes ran that Adam Thielen had last year. And the reality is that there are sometimes learning curves when you're a rookie. I mean, even with Justin Jefferson, you hear about it all the time. People dropping Justin Jefferson off of their redraft teams after the first few weeks in the season because it took him some time to get up to speed. So you might just be looking at, for the first 1, 2, 3, maybe the first 6, maybe the first 8 weeks, KJ Osborne will be the wide receiver 2 on that team. Now, the one thing I had completely forgotten about this, Jeff, you said, KJ Osborne will get you those spike weeks, and I had to pull up the game log because I said, I don't really remember any KJ Osborne spike weeks. I remembered a handful of touchdowns, but where did this game come from? Week 15 against Indiana, 16 targets, 157 yards, and a touchdown. If you can get a guy in the 16th, 17th, 18th round that's going to occasionally give you that type of production, that's exactly what you're looking for in best ball. So I really like it. And then Corey, I'm going to tie this into one of your takes from last year when we did a show that was similar to this, and we were talking about Jared Goff. And one of the reasons that you were touting Jared Goff as a deep sleeper is because you said that defense is going to be horrendous and it's going to keep them passing the ball a lot. And Jeff, kind of the same thing here with Minnesota. They have a very bad defense. They're going to have to continue throwing the ball a lot. So, Corey, I know we're getting deep here to start the show with KJ Osborne, but you got anything to add about KJ Osborne and the Minnesota Vikings offense?
I like KJ Osborne in that offense, especially like you guys were alluding to. And when you look at Kirk Cousins, I think he set a career high in pass attempts last year. And, when you get Dalvin Cook out of that offense and going to get to spread the ball out more pass, and KJ Osborne's going to have to step up.
Yeah. Well, off to a good start right now. We got a 3 for 3. You got the stamp of approval from all of us here talking about KJ Osborne. Now, if you're watching the show on YouTube right now, do us a favor, click the link in the description below for the full podcast version of this show. Right now, we just break this up, take some of the best parts out, and put it on YouTube. But if you want to check out the full podcast version, somewhere between 35, 40 minutes long with introductions and banter and jokes and all that fun stuff, find a link in the description below. You can also find the podcast anywhere podcasts can be found by searching Footballguys, Dave Kluge, The Launchpad, or anything else that reminds you of this show. But Link in the description below. Be sure to check out the podcast and leave a review if you enjoy that. Corey, who is your biggest sleeper at the wide receiver or tight end position for this season?
Yeah, I have a tight end guy, and it is Jelani Woods. He is currently being drafted 213.2 overall at tight end 33. So Indianapolis, they have a new head coach coming in, Shane Steichen, and he comes over from Philadelphia. He spent the last 2 seasons there as their offensive coordinator. So we look at Woods in his rookie season. It was kind of spent in a rotation. It had Kylan Granson and then Mo Alley Cox. Woods still was able to manage 40 targets, and he only played 33% of offensive snaps. So from this, he averaged 1.5 yards per route run on the season. And when we look at the last 6 weeks, so you take the first 11 or so weeks to kind of get in tune with the NFL, he finished as the second overall tight end in yards per route run at 2.6. For reference, Travis Kelce was about 2.12, if I remember correctly. And then overall for the season, he finished at a 17.4% target per route run. Now, a major concern was the new coaching staff. However, they didn't really invest into the position during the offseason. And now this offense is going to be looking revamped. We have the new head coach, new system, and rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson. Woods, he's an elite athlete, and I like the idea of the system that is going to be brought over from Philadelphia. And we know Philadelphia has always utilized their tight ends. Dallas Goedert, he has averaged 5.4 targets per game over his last 2 seasons. Now, the number 2 target is up for grabs in this offense, and it's kind of battling between, Woods, another rookie wide receiver in Josh Downs, a second-year wide receiver in Alec Pierce, and then a former Buffalo Bill as Isaiah McKenzie came over. So if, and it's kind of a big if, an emphasis that if Jelani Woods does see an increase in snaps, we're looking at a very intriguing situation and a tight end we're currently going to be getting around round 17.
Yeah, I mean, I love that call out, and you dropped some of the numbers there, and these are numbers that I talked about in a recent article that I wrote. Routes run data is something that I'm just starting to warm up to a little bit this year. I used to just look at that as, kind of nerdy numbers that I didn't really care too much about. But Jordan McNamara recently wrote an article talking about the, why we want to look at these numbers, because they do correlate to fantasy production. And Jelani Woods didn't have a huge role last year, but if we see that role expand, he has shown us that he can be very, very efficient on the targets and the routes that are given to him. So I agree with that. And one other thing is that rookie quarterbacks historically have a penchant for targeting their tight ends. So yeah, outside of Michael Pittman, there really isn't anybody that can step up as that number 2 guy, and Jelani Woods could be that guy. Jeff, do you have anything to add to this? I know we all really like tight ends a lot, and we try to always find that sleeper tight end. Much easier said than done. Could Jelani Woods be a sleeper tight end this year?
He could be, yes, definitely. And I think the biggest area where he could be is in the red zone. I think that's where you're going to want to look for it. My primary concern on the Indianapolis offense is with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, with Shane Steichen coming in. How much Philadelphia ran the ball 2 years ago in Jalen Hurts' first season with Steichen. I think that they're going to be very run heavy. That's my expectation with having Jonathan Taylor, with having Anthony Richardson. So that's where I think that Woods concerns me, because I do think that he's going to take over the tight end position. And I do think that he's great value, and especially at that ADP. And especially in a best ball format, when you're grabbing those touchdowns, those touchdowns are hitting your lineup. That's great. In a regular, you're setting the lineup, I think that there is going to be a lot of inconsistency and lower volume on Jelani Woods and just that Indianapolis offense in general. And I expect that they're going to run the heck out of the ball. And I think that that's going to be their game plan with Richardson, with Jonathan Taylor. And so that would be my primary concern, that I don't know, beyond Michael Pittman in an overall normal, set the lineup format, if you're going to get any sort of wide receiver, running back, tight end, passing production. But again, I think red zone, he absolutely could hit there.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, you were the one that kind of opened my eyes to this a little bit. I think there's this misconception that all Anthony Richardson can do is run the ball. And that's not the case. I mean, he is a good passer. So historically, we do see head coaches kind of turn the scheme down a little bit and make it a little more run heavy as they try to develop and grow these rookie quarterbacks. But Anthony Richardson can sling the ball. So if they do open things up a little bit, especially towards the end of the season when games are even more important as you get closer to the playoffs, if Jelani Woods could step up as that number 2 option for the Colts, he's got huge, huge sleeper potential there. So like that call out, Corey. Now, You guys both went really, really deep talking about KJ Osborne and Jelani Woods, guys you can get in like the 16th, 18th round of your leagues. The guy I'm going to tout here isn't so much a sleeper as somebody that I think is just wildly undervalued. Last year, Christian Kirk was the wide receiver 12 in PPR scoring. And, a lot of that had to do with him staying healthy for a full 17 games, but still, he gave us a wide receiver 12 finish. He was a top 12 wide receiver. Now he's getting drafted as the wide receiver 27. And I think that there's this idea that Calvin Ridley is just going to come in and make him irrelevant. And I don't see that happening. We saw Christian Kirk's role grow throughout the season. He saw his snaps increase, he saw his routes running increase, and he saw his targets increase, and he really developed into that safety blanket for Trevor Lawrence. And all you got to do is look at the postseason. In the 2 postseason games that the Jaguars played, he had 14 targets in each of those outings. He saw 494 of his snaps last year were out of the slot, which was the 3rd highest of anybody in the league. And then when they would switch to a 2 wide receiver set, he'd get pushed out wide. So he wasn't coming off the field. And I think that we're going to see that same exact role this year. The difference is that when they go to a 2 wide receiver set, instead of Marvin Jones or Zay Jones being that other guy, Calvin Ridley is going to be there, but Christian Kirk is going to see near a 100% snap share on a team that is going to pass the ball a lot. And Trevor Lawrence, we've seen him take huge strides now. Not so much his rookie season under Urban Meyer, but in year 2, we saw him start to develop as a very good quarterback with elite potential. And we see it often that these high-powered offenses with good quarterbacks can support 2 fantasy-relevant wide receivers. And I think that there's this idea that if Calvin Ridley is going to be good, surely Christian Kirk can also be good. And I think there's going to be enough volume in this Jacksonville offense for both of them to eat. Corey, I know you have been a Christian Kirk fan forever. I mean, I'm talking this guy's rookie year in Arizona when most people didn't know Christian Kirk's name. You were looking at the underlying metrics, and you said it is just a matter of time before this guy explodes. What do you think about Christian Kirk now in Jacksonville?
Yeah, I love it. All it takes, like you kind of just basically alluded to, is a coach, a system to believe in a player and really utilize him at multiple assets within the wide receiver position, slot out wide. It looks like Calvin Ridley on our dog. He's wide receiver 16. He is, going about 2 years of never playing, going on 2 years for playing his first game in a while. So who knows what that's going to look like, Russ, whatever you want to call it. So we might be looking at a big explosion the first handful of games here for Christian Kirk.
Yeah. Jeff, anything you'd like to add about Christian Kirk here?
So I'm not gonna throw cold water on it because I do like the ADP. And
go for it,
we're
man.
targeting
I'm
for
hot.
ADPs.
I'm hot right
now. Cold shower
water on me.
So the thing of it is when I look at Christian Kirk, where the areas of the field that he operated in last year are also the areas of the field that Calvin Ridley excels in. And Calvin Ridley, I believe that Calvin Ridley is simply a better wide receiver than Christian Kirk and an overall number 1 type wide receiver, whereas Christian Kirk can kind of fill that role as a pinch hitter. Then when I look at the areas of the field where Zay Jones and Marvin Jones earned their targets, they were shorter targets, which I also think plays into Christian McCaffrey's game, his ability to work, like you said, out of the slot in the short and intermediate game. So I'm worried that what we're going to see with Christian McCaffrey is Calvin Ridley operating in those more intermediate areas and getting that more of that wide receiver 1 target share, and a lot of the explosives off Calvin Ridley's game falling apart a little bit as he is kind of stuck more towards that receiver that he was in Arizona, that secondary receiver. He had the great explosion last year, and he's got another year up on chemistry with Trevor Lawrence, and he's got a year of healthiness, whereas Calvin Ridley's coming in from not playing. So those are all possible impediments on that. And my other thought too is you made a great point about him staying on the field, working in the slot, and then going outside. I don't know if they are more comfortable with Zay Jones being that outside receiver. So Zay Jones didn't have to come off the field last year. I just think there's a chance that they keep Zay Jones on the field because what he can do outside, and Calvin Ridley is that second receiver. I just think there's a chance at that, but I think it's a good call. But those numbers between Zay Jones and Christian Kirk ended up very close last year. And so this is one of those that if Ridley steps up as the primary receiver, and if some of that other volume gets kind of sprinkled around some of the other guys, if Ridley is a clear number 1, then that's where you're kind of pushing it on delivering value. But I think this is an ascending offense with an ascending quarterback in Trevor Lawrence.
So the one thing I'll push back on a little bit is we saw Ridley's role change a little bit. I mean, when he was in Arizona, he was used almost primarily downfield. And I think that was the Cliff Kingsbury offense, air raid attack, get guys downfield, stretch them vertically as much as possible. Last year, Christian Kirk saw a career low in ADOT and the highest yards after catch per reception since his rookie year. So he's starting to develop into kind of a different receiver. And we saw him running a lot more short routes and intermediate routes as the season progressed. So that's kind of what I'm hopeful, is that Calvin Ridley can kind of take over some of the deeper routes downfield while Christian Kirk can work as that safety blanket underneath. And the one other thing, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I think the fear is that Calvin Ridley is going to step in as the number one and that there is going to be no clear-cut number two. But we saw down the stretch last year, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram were all eating. I mean, that is 3 fantasy relevant players that Trevor Lawrence was able to support. So I'm hopeful that he can do it again this year, but of course nothing is guaranteed, and we are speculating this time of year. I like Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk. I like them both at their ADPs, but I just think that there's so much meat left on the bone being drafted as wide receiver 27 that if Christian Kirk could even finish as wide receiver 15, wide receiver 20, you're still getting good value drafting him where you can get him. Fellows, great time as always. Can't wait to see you both in person in just a couple months here. Before we sign off, though, one more time, Corey, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
That's Corey Spala, Coreyspala. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jeff. I'm excited to get started here over at Football Guys as well.
Yeah, brand new hire. It's awesome that you get to join on the
BNH.
show already. Yeah, but you'll be here in no time, cranking out some content at footballguys.com. So be sure to check that out. Jeff, let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at forwhomjbelltolls. You can find me with Football Guys, and check out all the content on footballguys.com.
And I'm Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. But we talked about this a little bit. I teased it last week, but you got to check out footballguys.com/rankings to see what we just unveiled. The most customizable ranking set I have ever seen. And we talked about this a little bit as we were designing it, but right now with so many different league settings and scoring settings and roster settings, shouldn't your rankings kind of reflect that same level of detail? Well, we did just that. Footballguys.com/rankings. I don't want to give away too much. Check it out yourself. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. On the right side of your screen, you're going to be able to see some other videos that we have here on the Football Guys YouTube page to help you prep for the 2023 fantasy football season. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. And be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys so you can see all of the video content that we have coming your way, like the Audible, the Pretend GM, the Football Guys College Football Show, and so much more at youtube.com/footballguys.